Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. Welcome back to the No Nonsense podcast. Today I'm joined by the one and only Noah J. How's it going, Noah?
Hello, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Hell yeah. So I want to kick us off with just a little bit of a reflection on the last month, right? So the new Zombies experience that we were all kind of dreading, I feel like, before it came out, Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, has been out for over a month now. And I want to just hear your sort of perspective of what you were thinking going into this, because I know that you played the game a little bit early. So what your perspective was from there, and then jumping in on launch, how that's kind of shifted in the last couple of weeks.
So I basically, when I went in and played early, they asked me, they're like, hey, like, I like want to hear your real opinion on this. Like, tell me what you thought. And I literally said verbatim, like, I'm going to be honest, it seems like it can be fun with some other people, but playing this solo, I ran around for a bit by myself, and it seems like maybe one of the worst experiences I've played in a Call of Duty, and that might just be my initial reaction. It might get better, but I do not see this game being very successful for solo players. So you're going to capture a certain audience, which is that kind of like multiplayer Warzone type audience, and I think you're doing a good job of that. But I'm going to be honest, I hated it for solo, which is what I told them off bat. But we've grown since then, Milo. We've formed our full opinions of the game, which I'm sure we're going to get into at this point.
Yeah. So I mean, I saw sort of indirectly, I saw your opinion through some of the pre-release content that you put out, and could see the fact that you were straddling a difficult divide, because on the one hand you were saying, like, there's clearly an audience of people here that will like this, right? Like, if you're in a co-op squad and you're going in for that specifically co-op experience, there's no reason why you wouldn't jump in here and maybe have a good time. But then on the flip side, there's obviously a massive contingent of solo players out there that you were having a representative experience of, I would say, where you jumped in and were like, well, this is so clearly not built for me. So what's the deal, right? And obviously Zombies over the years has been very solo friendly. Even when it's difficult, it's still been a solo friendly mode. But this certainly initially, from the look of the pre-release content and the short window of time that you were able to actually get hands-on with it, didn't seem so positive. But then the game came out, obviously. And so I jumped in for the first time. My first impressions were like, initially, holy smokes, like, the world is so empty, and why are the zombies in tier 3 so strong? And it just, like, it feels silly. And the fact that I have to grind through these contracts, it takes forever. Like, I don't have enough money, and it's just slow. And I was like, oh god, okay, this is, it's laborious, right?
Yeah.
But then I think, certainly for me, as I got more used to doing the contracts and found more ways to optimize things, that labor started to get reduced quite a bit, and a lot of the fun kind of started to jump out. And that's why initially for me, I was like, I'm not giving this a review for a solid chunk of time until I've digested it a little bit. So talk to me about how your opinions of it changed just real quick between like day one of launch and like that first week, let's say, as you kind of warmed up to the mode. Because you went from saying, I'm really not liking this on day one, I'm pretty sure, to a couple of days or maybe a week later saying, you know what, I've digested more now. There's room for this to evolve into like one of the best Zombies experiences of all time, or something along those lines, right? So talk to me about how that happened.
The hard part about this game, and this jumping forward even a little bit to touch on this, is like, it kind of coincides with where I sit on the game now. I basically said, as I'm playing this game more, as I'm understanding this game, as I'm unlocking schematics, as things are becoming available, like better attachments, metas are being found. We learn never to touch the Aether extractor's contract of all time if you value your life and time and just anything. Like, the meta formed that allowed for more expression for solo players, which basically, like, this entire time I've held the same opinion that multiplayer with your buddies just messing around, it really is one of the best zombie experiences for that. If you have a bunch of friends who you are bringing into zombies for the first time and you just want to have fun with them and they're like big Warzone kids, they're gonna jump into this, understand the base level, and somewhat get into zombies and be able to be like, oh, it's like Warzone, except I don't get two tapped by a DMR across the map. I can run around on the Warzone map and have some fun. Since day one, they have retained that and captured that. Where I kind of stand as someone who, on launch, when we're like, trying to optimize every single second to like get as far as we can, play with a squad. But aside from that, when I'm playing 99% of the time, I'm playing solo. And I prefer to play solo, even if it is like dragging nails on a chalkboard for the difficulty curve and like optimization curve rather than doing it with people, because that's what I prefer to do. I'd rather have the challenge and be able to do it solo than be forced to jump in with a squad. So basically where I kind of am sitting now is we started off very, very low. Everyone on this curve was just in the trenches. Everyone was like dogging on the game. This is one of the worst Call of Duty zombies of all time. Once we got into it, people started enjoying it. And I said this in a stream one of the first days. I said, there's going to be a peak in about a month or so where everybody is having their absolute optimal fun because everyone has figured out the game. Everyone is enjoying it. It's making sense. Like everybody's still interested in the game. It's still fresh. And then after that, I see there being a downturn at the end of that curve. And I think that's kind of where we're entering now, where Treyarch almost needs to step in, and we can talk about these if you like. But just, I think there are a few small things in this game that, I mean, maybe they're not small on the back end, but front facing at least, that could be changed to give this game a purpose and a reason for everyone to play no matter where on that curve you are. And instead of that curve starting to trend back down in terms of player enjoyment, I've been seeing some people start complaining about stuff. We could actually turn that into a full positive curve, or at least level it off so you have a base enjoyment once you've learned everything. And it doesn't start to feel like a labor or anything like that to start earning loot.
Yeah, I think even, and we were talking about this just a second before we started recording, but even looking at YouTube viewership as a kind of proxy estimate for what the engagement is like with the mode right now, it had a quite unusual player access pattern, or so, I don't know what you'd call it, but basically where at launch, Warzone, the new Warzone, Warzone 3, I guess, is it technically called Warzone 3, or is it just Warzone?
I don't know where they're at over there. I think they've reverted back to just Warzone, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so the new Warzone wasn't out yet because that was coming with Season 1, obviously, and so all the Warzone kids were lacking new stuff to do and were also not particularly keen on Warzone 2, and so I assume quite a large number of multiplayer and Warzone people were playing Modern Warfare Zombies at launch, and so we had that kind of burst of interest and player engagement. And then as soon as Season 1 came out, Warzone 3, or whatever it's called, also dropped. And so a lot of people then rotated off to go and do that. But just using YouTube viewership as a kind of way to identify where people's eyeballs are at a given time, I would say that overall, at launch, the engagement with this game was not as big as like a Cold War, right? But it was still very strong. I think that there was strong viewership at launch, and I would therefore associate that with strong player interest in this new mode. All of the people that were like, well, it's not round-based, so I'm skipping it, I think they actually ended up in the minority in that first week, and instead there was just a huge number of people being like, yo, you know what? I tried it, and it's actually really good. So that happened, but since, for me at least, the 27th, 28th, 29th of November, that kind of period, leading in to Season 1 on December, I think it was 6th, viewership has declined pretty significantly. And that's not to say, oh, like, I'm getting less views on videos. I'm saying, like, everybody's viewership has taken a little bit of a step down. And I'm curious if that's going to be a trend that continues here. And to speak to your point, if that's part of that kind of curve of losing players because people start hitting that wall of being like, well, I can't play the way I want to play. Like, I played the meta way, but I kind of got bored of it already, or what have you. And that's something that I think needs to be sort of explored a bit, because in the next, 2 months, we're going to have no new season. We're going to have some in-season content. So there's like a new warlord being added, Dockerbee. But other than that, the in-season content is minimal, I would say. And so if we get no new content until March next year, for instance, what are we going to do in the meantime? And I was watching your stream today, just before we jumped on here, And one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting was just talking about the fact that you as a player want to be able to jump in and obviously do difficult contracts or difficult objectives and things like that. But also you as a YouTuber want to be able to chain those things together so you can make really fun content. And the game kind of limits that a little bit right now. Can you just sort of like talk a little bit about where those limitations are for you and why you think that might need tweaking in terms of the content game for this game?
Right. So earlier you said player access pattern, and I've just been laughing in my head the whole time that you spelled out Pack-a-Punch a little bit, and I haven't heard a word you said. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, the way I'm looking at it now is that like there is a peak amount of let's say there's a peak amount of power that you can have. You have not played the game for a week. You load in, and say you've already unlocked everything. You load in with a dog, gold armor plate, immediate Pack-a-Punch 3 crystal, immediate gold tier gun. You are ready to go. Off rip. You can do any content in the game. You come in with a fully loaded soldier. You can do any content in the game, including that most difficult content, being it the Red Worm or Elder Sigil, stuff like that. That is the kind of challenge that I think is almost exclusive to this game, but also is not exclusive in this game. The way that people would take on this challenge in previous games is like, okay, I know this map like the back of my hand. Now I'm going to try to speedrun it. I'm going to make it as challenging as possible by maximizing every single second and completing this Easter egg. Or I'm going to get to round 100 as quickly as possible because I've learned the optimal routes. I'm going to even just go for round 100 in the first place. This is all difficult content to do. The fun of that is that it's so difficult that maybe it takes you several games, or maybe you do it and it's so rewarding that you want to do it again. The way this game is different is that the only way you can be rewarded after, getting all those contracts, doing everything, the only way you can be rewarded is either playing with friends and having a fun time, playing by yourself and having a fun time. Whatever that looks like to you, the game limits you in a lot of ways, and that there's nothing more to grind for. You've already got Borealis camo. You've already unlocked all the contracts. There's nothing to grind for that allows you to have an objective aside from just making the game fun for yourself. So not only can you not grind for anything at this point because you've already unlocked everything, but you no longer have an objective other than that. Like there's no like thing to reach for. And if you want to play the thing that's fun, I love playing the game and trying to solo the worm boss today. I did soloing the red worm boss and then going into the Elder Sigil and trying to do that in the same game. So like a ridiculous challenge, and I find that super, super fun. The problem is I can only do that for one game before I'm limited by my loot, and the current loot pool doesn't reward me enough for getting anything aside from some schematics that, we've already unlocked since day one.
Yep.
So
and
I think
on top of that too, so like I tried to do a similar thing the other day. I wasn't doing the Elder Sigil. I was just trying to do Red Worm solo. And I got set up and I was having a really good game. And then my self-revive that I had in my inventory just didn't work. And so my game ended. And I was like, well, I just spent all of this stuff on getting my Red Worm takedown. And now I've got 2-day cooldowns on everything. Do I just wait? Do I just not play the game for a few days now? Like, I don't want to have to grind for stuff that's not going to drop in my game as well because it's so rare.
Yeah.
For like this content that I'm trying to make. It's not even, I wasn't even doing it for the personal aspiration. I just wanted to do a cool video. And now I'm like, well, cool video next week, I guess, if the game works. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I think you have to allow players to play how they want or have an objective that allows them to reach that point. There's something to be said. You always want to have some sort of difficulty in your game, but I think there's also something to be said for if that bar is too high where, actually doing everything legit and completing everything, you aren't being rewarded. Like I literally today got my 3rd legendary Aether tool wrench drop ever since I started playing. My 3rd one of all time. So the reason I've been able to get these in the past is because people have been nice enough to drop them for me because I'm trying to create content around the game, and that's the only way that I can. I think basically all of these points are kind of summing up to, I think the game is sitting at a place where they don't want you to be as powerful all the time. I think there's something to be said for allowing us to get to a point where you don't have to tombstone glitch to be set up every game. I think there should be a way to grind up to that point. Just like once you finish grinding, you get the insane Borealis camo. I think there should be something in the game where schematics, supposedly the rarest loot in the game, which means nothing after you extract the first time with it. I think there needs to be a system in the game that I think would solve a lot of problems with it where, and I'd love to get your ideas on this as well. Every single time you extract out with a schematic that is a duplicate, it takes off 10% of your overall refresh time or crafting time in your inventory and gives you a permanent 10% buff. So, and then say at the end of it, like every single thing in your inventory is an hour-long cooldown. At that point, you've extracted with 10 Scorcher schematics. You've extracted with 10 ray guns. Incredibly hard to do. Super, super long grind to extract with 10 of every single schematic in the game. But it gives you something to grind for and gives you real meaningful progress toward that the entire time you're playing. I'm talking, that's like 100 hours of gameplay to get there, but every single game could get you a little bit farther toward that goal. And it gives you something to go for overall and allows you to ultimately reach this power curve where you are a god every game. And you've earned that. You have done it. It's the same thing as Director's Cut and Infinite Warfare Zombie. Same system.
Remind me how Director's Cut worked.
Basically, once you beat all the Easter eggs, you could spawn in. If I remember correctly, it was like with a perkaholic and then like with 20,000 points or 25k, something like that. I forget the exact what it was, but essentially everyone knew when you spawned in the game and you had Director's Cut on because you were a god compared to them. But you had earned that because you had done every single Easter egg and beat Mephistopheles, everything. Right.
Yeah. So I haven't come across that. Like I haven't seen that specific idea in my chats or Twitter, which is rare because the zombies community be theory crafting all the time. So so props for that one. I love the idea. I think that would be fantastic. The first thing that came to mind for me when you started talking about it just now is the Borderlands like attribute points that you can get, where you've obviously got like grinding for better weapons and you've got all those sorts of things, but then in the background you just have these very slight little character buffs that you can get. 1% extra health here, 1% crit damage there, like those sorts of bits and pieces. And it's also a little reminiscent to me of the Cold War Zombies perk upgrades, like the tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all that sort of upgrade stuff that we could do back then. And obviously that's been missing in this game. And I think a lot of us that played a lot of Cold War have sort of been going, well, it was weird at first, but I did end up kind of liking that in Cold War, and it would be cool if that level of customization did come back at some point, or just that breadth of character development. As it stands, we have 3 operators, and those operators can put on tier 3 armor, but that's kind of it. That's kind of the extent of that level of customization. So making schematics reduce your cooldown time would be so good, because weapons already do it with the insured weapon. So why not for the schematic, like the craftable? It also is not something that is like right now, the optimal way to always play with a gold wrench is to only play every 2 days. That's the optimal way. Whereas this would mean that the optimal way to play with a gold wrench would be to play with your gold wrench in one game, but then it would be also to do the hardest possible objectives that you can. So it incentivizes you to do those hard things so that your gold wrench is instantly off cooldown. And like you're actually rewarded for engaging with the game instead of detaching from it for 48 hours until your thing's off cooldown, and then you can play again, right? So in that regard, I love it. I'd be curious, do you think that if they did add some kind of system with that, where like you get like a 10% or 1% buff to your, I don't know, base health, or a specific perk is like maybe Speed Cola, like you extract with the plans, Speed Cola just goes like 5% faster or something once you've got those 10 extractions, like whatever it might be, or it could be tiered, right, with an actual tree. How do you feel about the idea, just to throw this into the mix, that it would be tied to the operator that you're playing on, and if you die, you lose your progress? So that operator specifically needs to actually like grind to build up to it without dying. It needs to be consecutive.
Well, I mean, in a perfect world, it's not my favorite, because I don't mind losing like, you know, an hour, 2 hour, even 3 hours worth of progress if it's like, you know, skill issue, you just died. I don't mind that. The idea of grinding for something over weeks and then losing it like a hardcore character in World of Warcraft, if you die once, you lose it all. You got to restart from ground zero. I'm not as big of a fan of that. That being said, I would still be all for it as long as they fix the crashing issues.
Yeah.
5 seconds into the first game today, I popped gold armor, legendary wrench, dog bone, tier 3 pack-a-punch, walked up to the first objective and crashed. So
No.
yeah, in a perfect world, it's better than nothing. I like the idea of, even if it is smaller, like say each schematic is 5% permanent cooldown decrease. Like the maximum it can go, instead of like 3 days, is like 2 days and 45 minutes. And then each one knocks another 15 minutes off. That kind of increase makes me feel like I'm constantly, progressing in the game. And even if they make it incredibly hard to do, I like permanent upgrades. It's the reason, like, did you feel like you were done with Cold War at any point before you had all upgraded perks? Because I didn't.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because also, I think the old Zombies formula relies to some extent on, as much as there are those systems in place for upgrades or what have you, there's also to some extent the expectation that you'll create your own fun in some ways. Like, you'll choose to go for the round 100. You're not like forced to do the round 100, but you'll choose to do it, or you'll choose to try and do it faster, or you'll choose to try and speed run the Easter egg or what have you.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, it's sort of like you're not choosing to do those things. It's more so that is what the game's objective is telling you to do, and therefore it's work, and therefore you only want to do it if there is a reward. And so I think in previous Zombies games, especially the earlier games, I've sort of looked at it like, well, I can jump in here and create my own experience because it's a sandbox that is built for that in some ways. Whereas in this one, I kind of feel like the sandboxy nature of it, as much as it's in theory broader, in theory there's like more optionality and stuff to do, it feels more narrow because I'm like, okay, but which one has the carrot on the end of the stick? Oh, my phone just activated saying, did I just say, hey Siri? No, I didn't. Don't know how that happened.
Xbox off. Yes.
Oh God, no. I have been playing on Xbox. So. I think in Cold War there was certainly the feeling, I don't know whether rose-tinted goggles and all that, but there was certainly the feeling that there was a greater amount of continuous stuff to work towards. Whereas in this, like, I've got my schematics and I'm like, okay, what now? Like, and I had people, Sulky?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sulky tweeted me a couple days after the game came out and was like, hey Milo, I've got my tier 3 schematics, I've grinded out for the tier 2 schematics, like I've done that. I'm working on finishing up the missions now in Acts 1 to 3. I'd really love to get your opinion. What should I do after that? And he was like, it would be a great video idea because there's going to be other people asking the same thing. Like, what should you do after you have your schematics? And I was like, oh, that is a great video idea. Thanks, man. And I wrote it down. Then I came back to it 48 hours later and I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell someone to do. And like, as it stands right now, I got my classified schematics, the 3 classified schematics in that very first game where we completed it together. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, why would I do it again? Like, yeah. I got the thing. So that's the end, right? Now, one thing I wanted to check, were you specifically talking about cooldown reductions only?
That's the example I've been saying in my streams and what I've been giving as just like, I don't necessarily like care if it's that. I think there just needs to be, in this game, right? Like, you don't have the same, I guess, breadth of things that you can care about in it because there's no crazy story going on. In Black Ops 3, half the community was out there trying to solve Easter eggs. The other half was like trying to decipher ciphers. The other half was trying to make sense of everything, like listening to every single character quote in the files and like broadening the story that way. There were so many different ways to enjoy the game that we're not just playing it. And the overall game was larger. In this game, at least so far, the story is a lot more contained to a few cutscenes, and it's not as big as it was before. It's been kind of like narrowed down into this group of nameless soldiers that are going in. One of which is Skeletor apparently, and so there's really only one way to, in a meaningful way, get into the game, and it's the gameplay. So I think that more so than in previous round-based games, the gameplay of this and the overall progression of this game is more important than it was, say, in Black Ops 3. Because if you think about it like a Black Ops 3 map, sure, once the Easter egg's beaten, you do not progress anything from game to game. There was no reason to go on once you found the Easter egg. But there is so much more to enjoy and explore in the world that wasn't necessarily playing the game. In this game, I think the gameplay is very, very important because it is more defined and just smaller, which leaves a lot of room for opportunities and fun things to do. And I have been these are all just things that I want to see done better. But overall, I'm having a blast with the game. I still I'm not playing one game and getting off. I'm getting on and I'm begging on my hands and knees to my chat, can I please have one Ethereum crystal so I can take on Worm Boss, please? I want to keep playing. So they're doing things right with the gameplay. I just think that there's only so far that you can push that with no more rewards. There's a reason people grind the most mindless camo challenges of all times constantly, every single Call of Duty. They're not fun. Everybody complains about camos, but they go for it because it is a permanent reward that you feel the difference of, or you can see the difference of. And that's just what I want for the overall game mode, even if it's incredibly hard to do.
Yeah. When they announced that I don't know its actual technical name in the store, but the new Ethereum operator skin that they added in season 1, when that was confirmed to just be in the store as opposed to being something that we earned from completing the Act 4 mission, I was so disappointed because I was like, you guys, you were doing so well. We got Bone Collector from doing Acts 1 to 3, and that's a freaking awesome reward. That is so good.
Yeah.
And it was a status symbol at first. It was really a mark of accomplishment. And now Act 4 just is okay, yeah, I guess you can do it or not. Sort of not deep, to be honest, actually.
It's just, as far as I know, it's just a charm and the weapon blueprint are the only two things.
Yeah. And I don't think I've used the weapon blueprint once, to be honest, because yeah, exactly. So do you sort of, if you had to create a wish list, right, of just a handful of things to tweak, either at mid-season for season 1 or at season 2 in February or March or whatever next year, we've got schematics being re-extractable to give you some kind of further progression, whether that progression be reducing cooldown times or whether that progression be a slight buff to how it actually affects your character, speed cola reloads your weapon 5% faster or whatever it might be. Is there anything else that's top of mind for you as to just significant improvements to the experience for you right now? I'm curious.
Aside from the obvious, which is PC is still crashing like crazy. I get a ton of people in my chat saying they literally are losing interest in playing the game because they're crashing with all their stuff every game.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I think loot pools need to be heavily buffed, especially in the difficult zones. I think they're okay in zones 1 and 2. But when you're doing an Elder Sigil and you get a blue rarity tool and
it's always a blue wrench, dude.
Dude, that should just not be even possible. I don't care if it was the unluckiest thing ever. It should not even be a potential thing to get. I think loot pools need to be buffed so that if you go into the game, when I just went into this game, I beat the Red Worm solo, and then I went in and did 2 out of the 3 contracts in the Elder Sigil. I came out and was going to be weaker in my next game than I had started that game in because I did not earn enough rewards to even get me to the same spot, let alone put anything in my inventory to bring in for a friend.
And because the stash is so small, it's not like you can extract with it anyway. Yeah.
So I think loot pools, obviously crashing. I mean, they know that one. That's almost not even worth talking about because that's an obvious one. And then I think just the overall experience of other players being able to harm your experience needs to be fixed a little bit. The fact that someone can steal a contract from you in the tier 3 zone and then you can be left with no contract spawning in tier 3 and just running around doing nothing I think that just needs to be tweaked. Those are some small tweaks that I would do. And then, the big addition to the game would be that, every single time you re-extract with the blueprint, you get 10% off the overall cooldown, the maximum cooldown it can go to.
Yeah. I've run into the contracts issue quite a bit where I've specifically wanted to do a certain thing in a match. I've been like, yeah, like this game, for example, I'm going to try and do the red worm, but I don't have flawless crystal to use, so I just need to like farm a load of points really fast and have time to do other stuff in the game. Yeah. But if there's maybe 2 teams running contracts in tier 3, which is not that rare, like I see that most games that I play, there just isn't stuff for me to do. And as a solo player without a squad, or as a player with a squad who's squad filled, or as a player that I've loaded in with a squad, I'm like, why are we Hunger Games grappling right now to try and get these contracts? And I don't know if there's a way that they could maybe add a system where if you're in proximity to the contract, you can kind of opt into the contract without opting into the squad, because clearly they don't want us to squad up with more than 6 people in a squad. Yeah. So I feel like there still needs to be some kind of solution so that the contracts themselves are accessible. And it's frustrating too, because as the year goes on, it's only going to get worse. Like, people are only going to get better at the game. It's not like people are going to gradually have their skills erode over time. Yeah. And so in April next year, half the lobby is going to be in tier 3 within the first, 10 minutes of the match starting. Maybe people will run like one tier 2 cargo contract if they can find one, because everyone's going to be fighting over them. But then everyone's just going to end up in tier 3, and it's going to be like, well, all of the challenge is gone and all of the fun is gone, because first of all, everyone is here, so it's too easy, and second of all, I can't even get the rewards for the stuff that I want because everyone else is taking them. And then when you do get a contract, you get a blue wrench. It's like, god damn it. So I think that kind of flow needs tweaking for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the game, this is just kind of like retouching on the overall point. Yeah, people, I swear every single one of my matches has someone running around with like 500,000 points. Like, the amount of people that are tombstone glitching to spawn in with absolute max everything that are still playing constantly is insane. Like, so many people are spawning in with god tier loot from the first second and are still playing the game. I think if anything, that should be a sign that it is okay for players to be more powerful on average, and they're not going to stop playing the game because they've reached a certain power level. No one is going to be like, oh, this is too easy when they're playing tier 3. Even if you're fully outfitted, tier 3 is still you can't just be mindless in there. You have to play with intention. There's no such thing as like overcompensating players for doing really, really hard difficulty, I think.
Yeah. So I think the fear that Treyarch presumably have is that power creep kicks in and people get too powerful now, and then they can't make hard things later because there's too much breadth between the basic players and the expert players and blah, 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 right? And I've seen people sort of playing that devil's advocate position on Twitter and things like that. And I think part of the reasoning there sort of misses the fact that back in the day, in like an old Zombies map, right, you'd have your period of setup, and let's say that period of setup was like 30 minutes, right? Let's say it was 30 minutes of setup, and then you were like, okay, I'm cooking now. I've got my Pack-a-Punch. I've got my alternate ammo type. I'm happy. I'm just gonna like run my strategy. Maybe I'm gonna try and get the wonder weapon out of the box, but beyond that, I'm probably got it already in the first 30 minutes. So like, I'm good. Or you do a quest for it, I'm good, right? And then people would play zombies for like 4 hours. And they'd play 4 hours of them being at max power and the zombies getting gradually harder and blah, blah, blah. But it would be 4 hours of time. And I think the devil's advocate position relies on the assumption that if people have 4 hours of time at max power within the game, like without the game ending because of the timer, they're just going to get bored of it. But that didn't seem to be the case with the old Zombies format. So why would it be more so the case now? And I think that speaks to your point about these people that are tombstone glitching and they're running around with 500,000 points. Like, they're clearly still having fun because that's sort of the way that the old Zombies experience worked beyond the first 30 minutes of the match. It's just that now I feel like I put 30 minutes into 15 minutes of fun instead of 30 minutes of setup into an hour of fun or 2 hours of fun beyond that point at a world that continues to meet, match, and exceed my skill level based on the zombies getting more strong and more of them and blah, blah, blah. So I would love to see Treyarch also experiment with raising the timer. I don't know if they're going to. I think that one of the reasons for that is that they want matchmaking to be really quick because there's so many players. And so they're like, well, shorter matches mean more people are spending more time in the queue. And so matchmaking will be faster and there'll be better ping lobbies and stuff like that. And like, I get that. But at the same time, I just want to play the game sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's cut off so frequently.
There's a reason, aside from even before I was thinking about camos, there's a reason that every single time I would go to the exfil at the start of the game, or like, 10 minutes left in the game, I go to the exfil and I I'm not even going for camos. I purposefully miss the chopper because it is so much fun to just see a horde of zombies and just mow them down. That was the most fun gameplay part for me, because you still have to be, watching where you're going. Like, you can't just be running backwards. You're going to get cornered by a bunch of zombies behind you. Like, just mowing down zombies is at its heart what Zombies is about. So if you allow players to do that and then, do that in a tier 3 zone, I know there's all these limitations with hardware and like game flagging, crashing, everything like that. I'm just saying, as a point, people have the most fun when you just let them shoot and kill hordes of zombies. Like, there's a reason why everybody loved getting the thunder gun out of the box back in the day, because you could get 12 zombies in front of you, blow them out of the sky, and it's exhilarating. Like, that's the feeling Zombies is about. And I promise that people will not get bored of being better than the zombies. Like, yeah. And especially, and I'm saying that as somebody who is like, I'd say, and realistically, higher than top 1% of players. Both of us are in like the top 0.01% of players. We have played this game more hours than people have played, like, combined. And and we both want more power. I don't think it's bad to give more power out on average, especially when most players haven't been playing as long and don't know what training is. They're worse at the game. They're not going to complain about the power either.
Yeah. So with the clarification made, because obviously there will be people listening to this that will say, oh, well, you're just not representative of my experience because you guys are better at the game than me and blah, 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 whatever. Or like, those conversations always happen. So with the disclaimer that we recognize we are in the hardcore portion of the community that are always going to be looking for a greater challenge than someone that just gets on once a week and plays one match and that's it, right? With that said, do you feel like the Dark Aether Rifts, both the base sigil and the Elder sigil, are they too easy?
It's such a tricky question because it depends on how long it's been since I played the game last.
Pain.
Because if I haven't played in 3 days, I can solo the tier 3 Elder Sigil with the exception of the escort contract, because that one's like really hard to defend. Obviously there's strategies, but you can get set up for that.
Use the VR11 to heal.
Yeah, VR11 to heal the thing. Yeah. Like, you can get set up for that one. But the other two, I did a stream where I soloed the other two contracts in an Elder Sigil without firing a bullet. I went in fist only and I beat it. So it's hard because that is only because I was off my 3-day cooldown of my gold armor plates. So if I went in with a fresh character, no gold armor plates, and a tier 2 pack gun with blue rarity, yeah, it's gonna be the most challenging content I've ever played in Zombies. But but it all just comes down to how set up are you? Did you have the ability to set up? Also, just real quick side note, adding to list of things they need to change. You need to be able to upgrade your gun's rarity in the game, and not.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well.
Even whether it be points, whatever. The importance of getting a gold gun is so high, and you just can't get one unless you get lucky. That's real, or you wait 2 days to play.
Yeah.
And I'm talking I've gotten 3 the entire time I played this game. The entire month I've played this game, I've gotten 3 total. So. Yeah,
I think I'm the same. I think I've got maybe 2 of them, maybe. Yeah. But it's certainly not more than that
Yeah.
it might be less.
Yeah.
They spawn so rarely.
I think the thing that's like the things that are really challenging that feel really good is like the red worm. Like that is a perfect level. The rifts, I don't mind making them harder. You just got to reward us for it. Like even if you don't make them harder, you can add more content off. I think it's okay to have content that some players never are able to do, as long as they feel like they can make meaningful progress toward those, and improve themselves at the game. And while they're doing that, they're extracting with blueprints that give them lower cooldown, so they can have more good attempts back to back. Start learning how to play the tier 3 zone. Start learning how to do the Aether rifts. I think it's okay to add in even harder content, but obviously that's through the lens of us, who are
the hardcore guys,
the hardcore players. But also, like, which should you cater to more? The person who plays once a week, or the person who plays every single day?
It's the person with the bigger wallet, brother.
That is true. How many operator skins are they buying in their 1 hour game?
Yeah, I mean, so there's been quite a big debate about like content that people will never be able to do, right, over the years, both in Zombies, but just in the wider gaming scene, I would say.
Like Elden Ring,
I feel like
something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referencing?
Well, there's a few angles of it. There's the angle of just difficult games, right? Like something like an Elden Ring or what have you.
Sure.
There's also then the angle of inaccessible games, where it's not necessarily that the game is just being hard as a design choice, a la Souls-like, Elden Ring, etc.
Sure.
But there's just other components of it that make it inaccessible. And then Zombies has kind of been having its own little micro conversation of this, saying, well, like, for example, I remember there was a stat at one point that came out saying something like only 0.01% of players actually did like the Voyage of Despair Easter egg or something within the first month of launch, or like it was something like crazy small percentage. And so people ran with that as this idea of saying, okay, well, like, they're putting so much development effort into creating that Easter egg experience, then nobody plays it. Like, what's the point, right? So all of these sorts of conversations happen, and I mean, it happened also in the past couple of months with Diablo. There was, and I know that you've played a decent amount of Diablo. I've played definitely a lot less than you have. I've not played the new one, but maybe you can fill me in here if you're familiar with what I'm about to say. There were items, I think, that were dropping at one point that were just so absurdly rare that like 99% of players will just never see them. Even if they just grinded forever, they would just never get the drop. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or am I?
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw that conversation from afar, and I saw people saying, oh, like, everyone should be able to grind to get this. Like, you should be able to put in a set number of hours, and then at that point, I forget what the phrase is that people use for this, but
like luck forgiveness type thing.
Yeah, like basically protection from really, really bad RNG, so that eventually you get the thing, right? So some people were saying that. Other people were saying, no, it's fine that like there's a pair of golden boots that only 20 people on the planet will ever get dropped. Like that kind of push and pull. Do you like just give me like 60 seconds of context on what that debate was in Diablo, and then how that may or may not apply to Modern Warfare 3?
So in my mind, at least, they're two completely separate conversations, because one of them is completely RNG based. And I think anything that discludes you from trying out this item, or like discludes you from even having a chance at like enjoying this, realistically, even to the point where like 1,000 people on planet Earth get one, like let alone 20. I think that can be an interesting aspect of your game, but it isn't necessarily like a positive. It can be an interesting aspect where like it has a super low drop rate on like the first week. Like I remember back to like Destiny, whenever someone got the Vex Mythoclast. Like, insanely good gun, super low drop rate, like, first week, played it, only a few people got it, it was super exclusive, YouTube videos went crazy, everything like that. That is an entirely different concept if they later buff the rates and they allow it to the general public if you play the game. I think that's kind of like the divide between this and Zombies. In Zombies, it's not the same to say, in my opinion, that like you're discluding players because they're not good enough to beat it. I think that, like, say with Elden Ring, right? Technically, anyone can beat Elden Ring. If you could be the worst player in the world, but technically anyone can beat it. It's just how quickly and how easily depends on your skill level. In Elden Ring, there's a way to, farm. Literally, if you have a thumb, you can kill them enemies and eventually level up, right? You can grind your power level. You can get stronger and stronger and stronger to where eventually a boss that would take someone 20 minutes of playing perfectly, you can kill in like 4 hits. You can play the game in that way. It's not discluding you from the content. It's just putting your skills to the test. In the same way that in Zombies, if you like work really hard, you can grind your way up. Eventually, you can get powerful enough to take on some of these really, really hard areas and content. Your skills are still going to be put to the test, but it's different than saying you're unlucky. You just can't play it. Sorry.
Gotcha. So the RNG aspect of it is like a key differentiator there.
Yeah. To
make sure that it's not something that a player would basically write off as going, oh, well, it's a 0.01% chance that this thing happens to me, so why would I bother? Whereas if it's like, are you good enough to do this? And they're like, I don't think I am good enough. But then they have opportunities in the game to power up. And like an example of this actually that I would give is exactly what happened to a whole bunch of different teams going into the first ever worm boss fight in Act 3 of Modern Warfare 3. So
yeah,
obviously at that point, nobody knew what the worm was going to be like. And like I'm in my game playing, doing absolutely everything I can to get over leveled and try and get over prepared. And then I get in there and literally during the worm boss fight, I'm purposefully not shooting the worm because I want the fight to last longer because it was dying so fast. Like that worm is just weak. And I was like, well, I've way over prepared here and that really sucks and that's really annoying because it trivializes the entire experience. And then in the Defeat Zakayev mission in Act 4, a similar thing has happened where at first people were like, oh my God, like it's really difficult, right? I think that the reason for that was just that people were using guns that were just basically ineffective. Like using a ray gun on that worm is just a bad time. Yeah. But now, again, it's like, I recommend to people to go in, and also weird that you would go in with pinnacle weapons and they would be like the worst things for it. But aside from
that's
that,
another conversation.
Yeah. Like the majority of people that are going to go into that are going to be using, I don't know, a BAS-B from Warzone that they've leveled up, or what's it called? Is it an MTX interactive or something? Well, that's like microtransaction. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's one of those. But like they'll bring that in. They'll have a bullet gun and they'll take the worm down without too much hassle, assuming they've got a squad. And it means that in terms of over preparing, like if you need to over prepare, right? Similar to the example that you were giving about Elden Ring, if you need to farm those low-level grunt enemies in order to be able to overpower yourself to fight that one boss, fair enough, fine. But what Elden Ring does is it presumes you aren't going to do that, right? And it presumes through the flow of the game and the way that it funnels you forwards that like you aren't going to stop for a moment and be like, okay, I'm going to take some time out to decide I'm not good enough here and to address that. Whereas in Zombies, it's sort of the other way around. It's sort of constantly addressing the fact that you're not good enough, but then the objective itself is a bit of a disappointment. And so, like, we jump into the Act 4 Elder Sigil Dark Aether Rift, and even though it's difficult, like, even though that cargo escort, that thing, the vehicle itself, the ACV or whatever it's called, loses health very quickly, it still doesn't really feel like a good challenge to me in many ways, because like it's not really a test of my skill whether this rectangular box is getting bonked by a mimic. Like I'm just like, it's a bit far away from what is enjoyable for me in terms of what's hard in Zombies.
I can see
and
that.
So it's like this combination of there's bosses that are really easy to take down. The red worm, I think is in a good spot. I like the red worm. That's like a difficult challenge and there's moving parts there. And I like that. But other parts of the game just feel like the ceiling for difficulty is really, really low. And I'm like, I want more, man. Like, and I want to sort of repeat ourselves a lot here. I want to be able to do that and then do it again without having to wait 3 days. And I think that's a real
for a
challenge
meaningful
right
reward.
now. Yeah, exactly. That's the final piece of the puzzle. And that brings us to the question of the Easter egg. Because at some point, probably in, I'm guessing like season 3, if I had to just pull a number out of a hat, we're going to be getting a main quest Easter egg in this map. Do you have any ideas how the hell that's going to work?
No. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I assume it will be something similar to the Easter egg that we had for unlocking the portal in the first place and doing that. And for what it's worth, I think they have done a really good job with that. It's just always, you know, I'm a top 1% player, just even in terms of time played. I constantly want more faster. And that's just an entirely other thing. That is like, there's almost nothing you can do about that because just game development is the way that it is, and Call of Duty is the way that it is. They have a release cycle, everything like that. So bringing that up is there's almost no point to it. But I think it's more so about that than it is like, because, you know, if everything, like, we're sitting here, we've beat season 1 into the ground like we already have. All that's fine if we know we have another season coming in a week and a half.
Yeah.
So it's and then we also have to keep in mind we play the game the most. So it's hard to balance all of those and in like a meaningful way. But which is almost why I love the old Easter eggs so much, because if you really think about it, the difference between us going into Revelations, booting up the first time, and then taking in an entire week and 2 days to beat the Easter egg, the difference between that and then I don't know who has the world record right now, Steve going in and beating that Easter egg solo in 23 minutes. Like, the only difference between those two things is knowledge. And, you know, obviously being really good at the game, but, like, you don't have to beat it in 23 minutes. You can beat it in an hour solo if you're not as good. The only difference between a week and 2 days and, you know, an hour is knowledge. So that is, like, where the disconnect is a little bit with this game mode, because you can't just go in and know the best strategy to, like, get geared fast. You have to know that strategy, but then you also have to, like, execute it. And then even when you execute it, there's not as much reward for that. So
and the difference between good execution and poor execution is very narrow in this. Yeah. Like, if I do a spore contract and it only takes me a minute in tier 3 and someone else does it in 2 minutes, it's the same. Like, there's no difference there. We're both still getting our blue wrench, so why would I rush? I hear your point that it's frustrating because we're obviously, again, coming at this from the perspective of the hardcore community, and so, like, obviously we want more Easter eggs now and stuff, and I also agree that I think they did a pretty good job with the way that the little hidden quest worked to get to the Dark Aether. Like, that process involving those little items, I thought that was good. That was just good community conversation generator. Like, that's a real benefit, I think, of an Easter egg, is that it's not just a thing to do in a game, but it's also a thing to talk about in the build up to it and go like, do you know how this works yet? And to have questions and to promote that kind of dialogue within the community. I think it's really, really positive and beneficial and healthy. And I'm looking at the next 2 months now going like, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I think that I am starting to already run out of ideas for ways that I can engage in the game in a way that excites me, despite the fact that I do really like this game. Like, I don't want anyone to misconstrue this. I came into this game thinking it was going to be significantly less designed for someone like myself. I thought that it was going to be much more casual focused. And so the fact that tier 3 doesn't completely hold your hand is really good. The fact that the Dark Aether contracts are there is really good. The fact that there's like a pinnacle reward for grinding through 30 hours of content and you get a bone collector skin, it's really good. Like, there are so many positives there, and I don't want anyone to misunderstand that. But as someone that does really like the game, I'm here now kind of questioning, like, what am I going to do next? And as a YouTuber, that's its own problem as well. And so to sort of bring the conversation back to something that you mentioned earlier. So like during that stream today, you were working on doing the Red Worm and doing like Elder Sigil all in one game. And I think you mentioned on the stream this weekend, you're going to do like even more stuff. You're going to do Elder Worm. Oh, sorry. You're going to do Elder Sigil and you're going to do Red Worm and you're going to do like Legacy, do some Warlord stuff and like pack it all into one match and have like the ultimate match of Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, right?
Yeah.
And those sorts of challenges, like, awesome, fantastic, like, love the idea. It sounds like it's going to be like a really exciting game. But in a week's time or in 2 weeks' time, like, we get to the end of December, let's say, through all of January and all of February, like, what is the community going to be given by the developers, by Treyarch, to kind of fuel our imaginations and promote those sorts of activities and making novel experiences like this in the community? Because right now I just don't feel like people are gonna want to do that. Like, I feel like we're gonna get to January and there's gonna be a lot of people that are going like, well, I don't care if you decide that you're gonna do like back in the day we would do like a 2-box challenge, or we would do a starting room challenge, or we do a rainbow perk challenge, right? I don't think people really care about that in Modern Warfare 3 because the players themselves are not aspiring to those sorts of things. The players themselves are going to hit that same sort of ceiling that we're hitting now, and they're going to go, well, I'll just play Warzone. So I'm like, do I just make Warzone videos in January? Like, what are you thinking on that?
I'll
like,
watch. I think it's hard because I think ultimately, like, even during like Black Ops 3 heyday, which is arguably the biggest Zombies has ever been, at least from a direct front-facing like YouTube viewership side, like even at this point, a month later after the first like map had come out, people would start to get, like bored,
sure.
move on to another thing. I don't think these games have infinite like viewer and personal player retention past a certain point. Everybody is going to lose interest in it at some point, which is why I think having those overall goals that are even near impossible to reach, or even just like 100 hours worth of gameplay to reach, but you can feel every single match like you left and you're like, okay, I'm a little bit better after that match. An overall feeling of progression is so important, and one that makes games like, World of Warcraft, which a game has, I've never even played it, but I know that game, based off speaking to people who have, has infinite progression. You are never done in that game because there is always something to grind for. And if you've done everything in that game, you can still get 1% higher on this certain roll on a weapon that you have, and people will go for that. People love the idea of becoming the absolute most powerful thing in the game. That is a huge driver of player engagement and there's just examples of that everywhere. It's the reason Destiny is big. There's so many. I mean, the gameplay for this game is here. It's great. I love the gameplay. I think it's very satisfying. Like a lot of parts of it, I think just you have to have something for people to latch onto for the hardcore community, for there to even be something to talk about. Like if I run over, for instance, if I'm in a game, I did this earlier. I drove past this group who were getting absolutely clapped by a disciple. I res 2 of them, deleted the boss in 1 second with my tier 3 golden pack-punch guns, got in my car and drove off. They were like, oh my god, I want to be that guy. Like, you need to have something to go for and grind toward. And even if that's like little tiny, like chipping away at like a huge, gigantic boulder, making those chips feels good. And with a game that is inevitably going to not retain everyone's attention all the time, for the people who are playing, the most important people, you have to give them something to go for, which I think that this game has up to a certain point, which is that curve that I referenced at the very beginning. Up to that certain point, until you've beaten everything and gotten all the schematics, it has a great curve. There's so much to go for. It's so much fun. Once you reach the top of that curve, it feels like it just is a downslope from there. But I think with a few small changes, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I think also, as you were speaking there, I remembered the fact that the first worm that we fought at the end of Act 3, I really, really feel like that should have been at the end of Act 1. I know that, like, story-wise, they're trying to, like, build up to it, blah, blah, blah. But part of the problem is that players like us are like, well, I want the boss fight, so I want to grind through to the boss fight ASAP. And as it stands right now, that means that I've gone through 3 entire acts of missions that I could be slowly chipping away at and slowly progressing currently, that instead I didn't sleep to get through, and now I never think about them ever again. And you can't replay them. I think that having a system where, like, if there were more missions added to the game in mid-season, for example, in Season 1, but they were more creative ways to play as well. They weren't just kill 3 mimics with cryo damage. Like, that's a little boring, right? But if they brought in some more inventive ones, like, for example, let's say that there was a mission that doesn't necessarily need to be finished in order for you to do the next one. So it doesn't frustrate you by gating your progress. But let's say there was a mission that was like, save a downed player from a special enemy 3 times, for example, right? And it's like it's just one of maybe 100 missions, miscellaneous missions, similar to the old calling card challenges that you'd have in like Modern Warfare 2, where they were just like a massive library of all of these calling cards that you could try and work on. Those sorts of things, just so that I would like in a match right now, I get 30 kills in a row without taking damage, and it says like Jackrabbit, right? It gives you that little medal on screen. That's fine, but I get that every game like 100 times, so it completely wears off, and I'm like, whatever, it means nothing. Whereas if I was just slowly chipping away and getting those sorts of things popping up saying, yeah, you just got that 3rd player revive or whatever it is, that like special, more custom mission type, that could then lead to some kind of reward towards the end of the year. Like, okay, once you've fully grinded everything else out, you get to spawn in with an extra 1,000 points, just like a small thing, like an RK5 Easter egg type thing like we got in Black Ops 3, just something for completing that overall wider pool of stuff. Right. I think that could be really cool too, maybe. Yeah,
I think that whether it essentially could even be the same thing that I was talking about earlier with like extracting with schematics multiple times. I think even better, a combination of those two things. Say, kills shortly after reloading. After you get X amount of those, you get 5% reload speed. So you go into a game and you're getting kills after reloading like crazy, and you're doing tier 3 contracts, and you're completing another one that's like, kill 100 mega abominations. You get like 6 mega abominations killing your game. You did a bunch of contracts. You get like a Deadshot daiquiri recipe and like a ray gun schematic. So you're like, oh my god, I got so many schematics and so many things I need to exfil, so all of these count. You run over the exfil. It's like final zone. You're fighting off everything. You exfil. You could have beaten everything in that game. That game feels great now because there's certain things to go for, and I think that calling cards and everything are great, but they're
actual buffs
the average player, myself included, like, I'd rather have them there than not, but the average player doesn't care about those. Yeah. Like, I think maybe they do, but I personally, if I get a calling card, I'm like, cool, bro, sick.
Yeah, back in the day with Modern Warfare 2, I was obsessed. To be clear, I was all over those Modern Warfare 2 calling cards in 2009.
Now I don't even know how to get to the calling cards in the UI.
Yeah, same. And just thinking about like what some of those in-game missions that were more sort of complex could be. Let's say it's like take down 6 abominations in one game, and that gives you plus 1% abomination damage. Like, I don't care if it's...
I love it.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be 20%. It doesn't need to be something that's going to be game-breaking. I would do 6 abomination kills in 6 consecutive games for 0.6% future abomination damage. Like, I'm clutching at straws here, Treyarch. I'll work for cheap. It's below minimum wage. Like, just give us something where I can be like, well, I have a little green check mark in my UI that says that I've done this. And when I'm fighting that abomination in the future, there's like a little mark next to my crosshair that shows that I'm getting a 0.6% buff to my damage because I did a cool thing. And then people on stream would be like, why do you have that little icon just next to your crosshair, that like tiny little dot on the like the end of the crosshair? What's going on? Why does your hit marker look different to mine? And I can be like, because I'm cool, okay? That's why. Like,
or You just have a buff that's like after you kill a million of mega abominations, you get a mega abomination to 50% health and it explodes in fireworks.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh my god, what did you just do? And you said, I have the mega abomination mastery trophy. And everyone's like, whoa. And then everyone's like, yeah, anyway, they're never going to develop this. Why are we even talking about it?
Treyarch, I hope you're listening and taking notes. And I want this to lead into our final little conversation point here, which is Black Ops 6. Okay. So at some point in October or November next year, we're going to be getting a new Treyarch-led Call of Duty. It's being called Black Ops 6 right now, but the actual name is probably going to be Call of Duty Black Ops Gulf War. And it's going to have a zombies mode developed by Treyarch. They're working on it right now. They've been working on it for years. Technically, in a weird way, this is like the longest Treyarch dev cycle on zombies that they've had for the last couple of games, because they've had to do Vanguard and they've had to do Cold War on a short dev cycle, and there's pandemic, and there's weird sort of wonkiness with things. But they've been on this for a while. They've been cooking, right? Granted, they've also been having to make Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, so to some extent their dev time has been shortened, but they've still been cooking. I'm curious if you have any high-level, real sort of things on your wish list or desires for that game based on what we've had this year, and what your thoughts are on how the hell they are going to juggle the fact that they divided the community by introducing Outbreak and 50% of the community loving Outbreak and 50% being obsessed with round-based. There's now new divide included with the addition of Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. How the hell do they merge those things together, and what are you looking for from that game next year?
Well, I don't think there's an end-all solution to how you merge everything. And I think it just is going to come down to whoever is in charge of greenlighting and not greenlighting things. It almost comes down to that individual or like group of individuals on, are they going to allow Treyarch, based off what they've said, these open world zombies experiences, Outbreak and this one, have been by far more successful than round-based zombies has ever been. That's what they've said. Are they going to even greenlight a classic type of zombies experience? And that's, sure that we have like people who have leaks that say, yes, it is round-based. That's really the first question though. Like, is that even true? Is it round-based in the way that we think it is going to be? Is it even round-based? We don't really actually know for sure until they say anything. The biggest thing that I would like to see in the next mode is just the feelings that I got playing the old mode, the feeling of mystery, the feeling of like not having a base understanding of the world, and the way that when I load onto the Warzone map, I know I'm playing a Warzone map. I want to load onto a map, even if it's repurposed from a campaign mission or et cetera, however they usually reuse assets, that there's a way to make the atmosphere and make the story feel like you don't have it all figured out in the first game or the second game or even the 100th game. You always think about that like hanging body that we had from the previous games. Like, who is that? What does it mean? That question went on technically unanswered for years. And eventually we got the answer to that. That kind of like feeling is what I want out of the atmosphere of it. As far as gameplay, I would love the return to round-based zombies. I don't want to see armor in it. It's probably going to be in there. It's been in the last 2 games.
Yeah.
I think armor's here to stay, unfortunately. I'm not a fan of armor. I want to see like the ability for skill expression, like cool jumps you could do. The old what's it called? Aether Shroud, like jumps through walls, stuff like that. Even as recent as Cold War, there's a lot of skill expression in the game and things that you could do. I want to see like power. The number one thing I want to see overall, and as my last point, is I want to see gun damage. I think Black Ops 4, the reason that so few people like that game on launch is you went from the most powerful we ever were in zombies in Black Ops 3 with like crazy good alternate ammo types. Every gun did damage, really good double tap. Everything felt powerful in Black Ops 3. We went to Black Ops 4, and by round 12, you better hope you have like a 5 times pack-a-punch gun, or else you're not killing anything.
Yeah.
So I think feeling powerful and just taking zombies to the fun part, which is shooting big hordes of zombies, is the most important thing for the gameplay.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all those things. I think the art direction in Modern Warfare 3 is the weakest part of the zombies. I think that the art direction in the mode is just kind of uninteresting. As much as, like, I like the worm, for example, the reason I like the worm, weirdly, is because it's like a departure from it being Modern Warfare. And I'm sort of there going like, thank God Treyarch got to design something and they didn't like have Infinity Ward looking over their shoulder being like, nope, Soap has to look like Action Man. Like, you're not allowed to do anything that looks Treyarch. Like, it's exhausting, right? So I think the art direction being true Treyarch, crazy, confusing, mysterious, enticing art direction, I look forward to and pray for on a nightly basis to my shrine of the Treyarch gods. And then gameplay wise, I think it's interesting. We've talked many times over the years about that difference of gun damage in BO3 versus gun damage in BO4 and the vast implications that has on the gameplay experience. Then obviously going into Cold War. Cold War ended up being a real ray gun heavy meta. And just in general was this back and forth between different camps arguing about how zombies had been and where it was going with the addition of armor and stuff like that. I kind of feel like we're never going to feel like we're playing Black Ops 3 Zombies ever again. Like, I feel like that type of game and that type of player experience, not just in terms of like the way the game is designed, but the way that a player engages now. I think if a BO3 released today and a player jumped in, they would feel very strange about the way that game is designed. And so in that sense, I think that there's going to be a lot of new stuff that comes up for Gulf War that we're all a bit like, huh? What? You're doing what now? The same happened with Black Ops 4, and I think some of those decisions were really good ones and others weren't as strong and could have had better developer context given as to why those decisions were being made. I can only hope and pray that they do that for Gulf War. But overall, I think for me, gameplay, absolutely essential, of course, and I agree with your point. I'm just desperate for the story to actually get good again, man. I'm just so frustrated by how weak it is. And this is coming from probably the person on the planet that has put the most time thinking about the story outside of Treyarch's own sort of walls, right? Like, I don't think that there's anyone else on the planet that for the last 14 years has obsessed over this story as much as I have, which is not necessarily an accolade to be proud of, but it's one that I've got pinned to me that I can't take off, right? And I found it really interesting looking at your takes on the story for this game, because I think that you're a really good measure of what a lot of the gameplay focused community, the parts of the community that really, really love the gameplay as the peak of the experience, like what they are thinking, right? I'm using you as a weather vane here. And when the cutscene came out for the end of Act 1, right, and you watched that, I was getting comments on my stream saying, Noah's watching the cutscene now, and he's bored, right? And I'm like, if Noah's bored, that's a very bad sign, because if he's bored, every single other gameplay-focused person, more or less, is going to be having a similar reaction, which I think can be summarized as, why am I watching Soap talk about zombies, but talk about it in a Modern Warfare way with nothing else going on for a minute and a half, and I'm supposed to care? Like, why? And like, now we've got some other cooler elements coming in with the story. Like, I think the Act 4 cutscene is sick, personally. I don't, do you?
Yeah, it's great.
So like, that cutscene is awesome, but I still just don't see any real reason to dig in to try and sort of hypothesize about things and to theorize about things, because the ability for me to do that is so capped by the fact that there's nothing in the world. Like, in a previous game, like, for example, DE, right? Obviously, I'm cherry-picking BO3, whatever, right? I could cherry-pick any map, genuinely, but I'm cherry-picking this one because it's something that's come to my mind. The newspaper Easter egg in DE is so weird, right? but also has story links there that you could make genuinely 5 or 6 videos on that alone. You could have a dozen Reddit threads all disagreeing about what that is, and it would be a continuous point of conversation for months or years to come following the release of that map. There is nothing. I can't think of a single example in Urzikstan of anything like that. And I don't know if I'm just being unfair there, but I mean, can you think of any thing that requires further investigation in the map itself? Anything that you're like, I want to like get in another game and just look at this thing and try and unpack what that is? Is there anything?
There's a zombie.
One zombie.
There's a zombie. No, I mean, the unfortunate reality that we have to accept probably going forward is that the main interesting thing in the story, like there's a million interesting things in the way they told the story in the old maps. The number one most interesting thing will probably never return, which is the characters in it and their quotes. And unfortunately, I think that is never coming back thanks to Warzone and the way that Fortnite changed gaming and how companies make money. And the model that they, make additional revenue off the base game sale. Operators just make them too much money, and it will never go back to a system where they care more about the small subset of the community more than they care about the money that operator skins bring in. So I am already mentally preparing to have Nicki Minaj running around on Black Ops Gold 4 because I think that just is the inevitable future. I would love to be surprised, but I think that is just how it's going to go. I don't think that anyone who is working on it has any say in that matter, because that is just what Activision's baseline is. And they are a company. They're going to do what makes them the most money. And if the zombies people who care about the story spent a whole bunch of money on other stuff in the game, they would do everything to make us happy, but that makes more money. So
let me just drop $1 billion on like buying
just
lore items.
Yeah, literally. Like imagine the shop and you could read like Samantha's diary or something.
Bro, where's my credit card? Where's my Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
There is never going to be, again, the system that I've mentioned is that by default you spawn in, say it's Black Ops 4. You spawn in as Richtofen and the crew. By default, you get all the quotes, you get the whole experience. And then, like, after you played the map once, or even before you played it once, you can change your operator and say, I don't want to play with the default characters. I want to play as Captain Price now. Or I want to play as 21 Savage. Like, you can do all that if you'd like to, but you still get the game experience. And it really just comes down to, like, dev time. I'm sure that's difficult to do. They're on a new engine, everything like that. So yeah. There's a lot of things that are just out of everyone's hands who would care. It seems like, at least that's my perspective on it, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm hopeful for the game. I know that Treyarch are obviously working super hard on it. I know that they've worked super hard on Modern Warfare 3 as well, and I think that they've been very successful in a lot of areas in Modern Warfare 3. But there are also things that I struggle to let go of, and my love of the story is one of them, and I will forever be sad that the old storytelling phenomenon that was the Call of Duty Zombie story from 2009 to about 2019 feels like it will never return. And it's even down to the feeling of discovering a story as a player and that being part of the game versus just being told a story. I feel like the Modern Warfare 3 zombie story could be a movie. Like, what's the difference? I don't feel like I'm participating in it. I don't feel like my agency really matters. Why would I dig? Whereas the old Call of Duty Zombie story was so, like, bubbling with all this interesting stuff at all times, and it really felt like players had a driving, steering hand in that. And I miss it. But there's a lot of good in the game regardless. And there's also a free week right now, so anyone listening, just as a heads up, you can jump into the game for free for the next couple of days and give it a try. And I really, really recommend you do, because despite the fact that Noah and I have sat here and said, well, the game is like missing this feature and that feature, and it's missing this like super late end game experience and things along those lines. For the first 30 hours, I'd say that there's a hell of a lot to do. Like there's an awful lot of stuff to do in the game, and I really, really personally recommend that everyone check it out. Even if you think, oh, it's not round based, so I'm not going to like it, give it a try. Give it like minimum 3 hours of game time. Get past those first 2 initial games of it being a bit awkward, you learning the map and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of fun to be had.
Yeah, I always caveat all my like things that I'm complaining about and like wanting improved and everything like that. I always say if I didn't like the game, I wouldn't care. But I
so
really
true.
like the game. If I didn't like the game, everyone's like, oh, you just complain all the time. You don't like it. I'm like, if I didn't like the game, you just wouldn't hear it. You wouldn't hear about it from me. It would look like Vanguard, where I played it 1 time, 2 times maybe, and I was like, well, this is absolutely awful. And then you never saw it on my channel again. That is what not liking it looks like. I want it to be great because it's already really good. And I think that there are some realistic dev changes that they could do if they are able to use the time to implement these. There are realistic changes to it that could just add so much to it.
Yep. I'm agreed. So thank you everyone for listening today. We're going to wrap this up here. Do you have any final words, Noah J? Where can people find you?
You can find me in 2 days when my schematics are ready to be crafted again, and then I'll be live.
Hell yeah. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, if you guys have enjoyed this, this podcast also has episodes featuring members of the Zombies community, such as the Act Man. What?
Yes.
And a handful of other folks as well. We're going to be bringing on different guests each week. So thanks for being here. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.